Today on Locked On Red Wings, did Detroit make any inroads in the Atlantic Division? We talk about each team and whether or not they got better or worse after free agency.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. And, I think this is going to be a fun conversation for us today, Scott. We're going to look at each team in the Atlantic Division, and we're going to talk about whether or not we think that they've gotten better or worse and how Detroit stacks up against them after the free agency moves and trades that have been made. And I think it's a fun conversation because I'm not sure many teams did get better in this division, but I'm also not sure a lot of teams got marginally, remarkably worse either for the Red Wings' sake, too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, we talk about the Wings in a vacuum every day, right? And so I think that these kind of conversations are important to just take a step back and be like, hey, while we are all obviously hyper-focused on what Detroit does, other teams can get worse and better too, right? Like other teams can have bad off seasons. Other teams cannot get big name free agents. And that was kind of a reoccurring theme across this division outside of, the very top, which obviously we'll talk about. So I think this is always, just an important conversation and I'm not sure whether it's going to be super positive or negative in the Wings light, but it is important to have just to kind of reiterate the point and highlight the point that other teams are adding and subtracting as well, just the same.
Yeah, and we're going to go in reverse chronological order of how they finished, with the exception of the Red Wings, who we will save to the end. We talk about them every single day, and you can hear our thoughts on their offseason to the very end, but we'll save how we believe the Red Wings stack up against those teams to the end. But we got to start with the team that finished last place in the Atlantic Division, and Scotty, you were surprised when I reminded you before we started recording that it was not Buffalo this season that finished in last place. It was the Boston Bruins. And Scotty, obviously we know they lost Brad Marchand at the trade deadline last year. They did add quite a bit. They added Tanner Jeannot, Sean Corrali, Mikey Esiamont, and Victor Arvidsson through trade, I believe, from the Edmonton Oilers. What do you make of their offseason, and do you think that they got better or worse?
I think it's probably fair to say they at worst stayed the same and at best got better. I'm not sure they got substantially better, but I think that they raised the floor a little bit. I have to give you credit with the Bruins, which obviously I hate doing. I hate giving Brian credit. But last season, because we do our preseason projections every year right before opening night, and you had said that you thought this was finally going to be the year that the Bruins fell off. And I said that I'll believe it when I see it. Well, now we've seen it. And I'll ignore the fact that you said it 3 years in a row and just give you credit because you're cute and you deserve it. I think what?
I was going to say, I don't think you can give me too much credit because I've been saying that for 3 straight
right,
years.
That's what
so
I
it's
said,
like the broken clock gets right twice a day type thing. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Right. So I think, I don't know, man. I think they're not in like a tankathon, like full blown rebuild, but they're certainly in a, I hate when people go through in a retool, not a rebuild. Okay. Like that's just a rebuild, but not as dramatic. Like it's the same thing.
It's putting off a rebuild is what it is.
Right. I think that they are still actively trying to improve the roster and get back into the postseason. I'm just not sure with, you just mentioned what they added this offseason. Look at what they've lost in the last 2 off seasons. The last 2 summers, they have been gutted from their core, right? Like they're that core team that set the regular season record and was, the cup favorite however many years in a row. Like that team is almost completely eradicated. And so I think that the fall off has finally happened. And I think, again, they got better, but I don't know if they got enough better for me to think that they're going to like catapult back into the top 3.
The acquisitions that they've made are very clear, like trying to add a physical element to their team. That was like their huge before the Panthers. That was the physical, mean, dirty team in the NHL for a lot of years. The Zdeno Chara era was the big, bad, mean Bruins, and it feels like they're trying to bring some of that back, but just the players they're bringing in, Tanner Jeannot, for instance, like the talent's just not there with those guys, and we know they lack center depth. They lost Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand, two of their best centers in the last couple seasons here. I struggle to see with the center depth that they have how they're going to be a competitive playoff team. I don't necessarily think losing Brad Marchand, they got worse. But they're firmly in their 2011 to 2016 Red Wings era right now, where they're trying to maintain themselves as a playoff threat, or what the Penguins were doing up until this offseason, where they're trying to hold on. Not many teams can successfully retool. The Capitals this last year were an anomaly. Usually doing that does not pay off. They had a bunch of players with career years. The Bruins, I feel like they might not have gotten that much worse. Maybe they got better on the fringes, but I can't say they got better. I certainly can't. I think they're going to finish 6th or 7th again.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the difference between last and second to last, maybe.
If they finish second to last, it's because McAvoy and Pasternak are still phenomenal players.
For sure. And I think, yeah, I agree with all the points you made there. I think that this is just a team that is, well, it's I don't know. I like that you compared them kind of to the Wings that are hanging on. I think a lot of front offices kind of have the mindset, especially in hockey. You see it really mostly in hockey and baseball because they're the two most unpredictable postseasons, where it's like, if we can just have a playoff team, then anything can happen, right? And like, it doesn't matter if you're the 16th team to make it in, or whether you're the President's Trophy winner. Anything can happen in the postseason mentality has led and encouraged those caliber of teams to just stick around because anything can happen. So, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible for them to finish, like 5th maybe, but
David Pasternak again.
Right. I think the days of them being a solidified, bona fide top 3 team in the division are probably behind them. But again, like they're a team that could make trades too, the last month of the offseason here.
Scotty, Buffalo Sabres finished 7th in the division, second to last. They traded away J.J. Peterka, got Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan in return. Pretty nice return for Peterka, to be honest, especially considering he was forcing his way out. They got a second pair defenseman. They got a young player who still has some upside potentially within him, and Josh Doan. But outside that, their free agent acquisitions, they got Alex Lyon, so they have a serviceable backup in their system now. They got Justin Danforth. They have Connor Timmins. Those aren't really, in my opinion, ads that move the needle, and so few teams in the NHL this season got moves that move the needle through free agency. But losing Peterka is a big blow, and I think they replicated it. They replaced him nicely with players who might have less impact than a JJ Peterka, but will still improve their team in those areas that they have. But it just is that trade-off in losing Peterka. Did it level out enough that this team got any better?
Yeah, I guess similar to my mentality with the Bruins last year is kind of like that, but inverse with the Sabres. Like, I'm going to have to see it work before I'm like, this is a team that's going to take a big step forward. And that's not disrespect. Like, the Wings can't figure it out either. But I think that there is talent on that.
Oh, we say it every year.
Right. There is young, good, high upside talent. That their top pair, I think, is a pair that has the ceiling to be legitimately one of the best in the NHL. I think that, obviously Tage Thompson, like they have the talent. They just, like you said, it really comes back to how are they going to prevent goals on a consistent basis over 82, and I'm still not sure they have the answer to that. Yeah,
I tend to agree with you on that one. It's going to have to be a see it before you believe it. I think that their biggest flaw, right, was, as you alluded to there, their defense. Kesselring makes them a better defensive team. He's going to slot in their top 4. Josh Doan, I don't think he has the ceiling that Peterka has, but he can be a middle 6 winger for them. it's just they lost so much offense in losing Peterka that it's just, if anything, they're going to be just as good or bad as they were last season without necessarily taking a stride forward. It's like you said. Every year, this is a team that we look at the roster construction. We say this is a team that should be better than they are with the talent that's on this roster. And then every year they finish at the bottom of the division. So I can't say they got better just because I think they got better defensively but got worse offensively. But I don't think they got necessarily worse either over the offseason. They kind of stayed put, more so than I think the Bruins did. Let's head to a break, Scotty. When we return, we'll talk about the Montreal Canadiens in segment 2, along with the Ottawa Senators, two of the teams that finished in the middle of the pack. Again, we're skipping over the Red Wings, saving them for last. Stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we're going to move on to the Montreal Canadiens, and I think this is one of the teams in the Atlantic Division who, and we said, credit to both of us, pat ourselves on the back here, we said it last offseason. This is a team that was going to be a threat sooner than a lot of people wanted to admit. Now, did we, either of us, expect them to do what they did this season? No. But they were a team that played above their means the season prior, despite being a rebuild team, and took another step forward with the emergence of Lane Hutson this season. They made the playoffs, shocking kind of everyone, and then they only added to that roster by bringing in Noah Dobson and Zachary Bolduc. Sounds weird saying it like Bolduc. They didn't really do much in the free agent market. They did bring in Capo Kakkonen as, NHL veteran goaltending. But outside of that, they really did not do a lot. But those two trades that they did make were impact trades. They did lose Christian Dvorak of note, by the way. He did leave the the Canadiens. But those two acquisitions they did make, I thought, moved the needle for Montreal in a positive direction.
Yeah, and I think the thing with them, and we'll obviously talk about that a little bit more in depth when we get into our preseason predictions and anything right before opening night. But the thing that they have going for them too is they're so young that there's also like a little bit of room for still natural just like development and progression that going forward as well. So yeah, man, like this is a team that we've obviously, like you said, had our eye on for a few seasons now, and it's here, and they're taking advantage, and they are. I think they're a pretty darn good team, to be honest, and I think that the moves they made this offseason make them even more well-rounded. I think there's still some improvements that could happen on the back end, but I don't know, man. Like I think they're pretty good and pretty, like I said, pretty well-rounded.
Right. Bolduc had 19 goals and 37 points this last year. He's going into the final year of ELC. I don't know why St. Louis traded this guy away, because the player they got in return, like I just don't see. He's a fine prospect on the ice, player-wise, but I don't see him being as impactful as Bolduc already was. So it's a question move. We already all know about how good Dobson can be, even though he had a down year this past season. He had 70 points the season before. So, and I agree with you on your take that this is another team that could get better because they are also still so young on top of everything. So, yeah, this is going to be, they were the final wild card at 91 points this last year. They caught fire at the right time to get there, but, the Red Wings may have gotten, we'll talk about this when we talk about the Red Wings, but that bar for making the playoffs may have just moved from like 91 points to 95 points. So the Red Wings might be 5 points better to get to 91, but are they 10 points better to get to 96, which would be clear that bar? That's the conversation we're going to have about the Red Wings. But yeah, Montreal, I think, very clear got better this offseason just through the trades they made alone. Next team up is the Ottawa Senators, another team that finally broke through and made the playoffs after years of memes. Their big acquisition this offseason, Scotty, obviously being the fact that they retained Claude Giroux. They added Lars Eller and Nick Cousins as well. And they traded for Jordan Spence, which was a big one, too, out of the LA Kings. He's a good young player. This is a team that I think got better just through those acquisitions that they made. I mean, just Nick Spence on its own, I think makes them, not Nick Spence, combine Nick Cousins and Jordan Spence. Jordan Spence on his own, I think, makes that team better. I don't know how much better this team is than they were last year, but they were a playoff team that I think is taking another step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll be real with you. I hate how much I actually like their offseason.
Yeah.
I think they made I think they made really good additions. I think they fit the lineup card well, and I think they spent a lot of money last year in between the pipes, and they spend more, out on the ice this year. I don't know. I like I said, I hate how much I actually like what their summer is looking like, because they finally made the playoffs, and now there's, assuming health, there's a chance they even got better.
And it doesn't get any easier from here because the teams. I mean, there's one team without a doubt that we'll talk about got better, but that doesn't mean, or got worse, but that doesn't mean they're going to be bad. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But next up, Scotty, is the team that finished third in the Atlantic, but won the second Stanley Cup in a row in the Florida Panthers. Back-to-back cups, A-plus offseason for them, right? Like they managed to not. And this is part of the problem with the salary cap going up is, and Yzerman said it in his media availability, there's less teams in cap hell. The salary cap going up means teams can retain more players.
Right.
They were able to retain all of Aaron Ekblad, Sam Bennett, and Brad Marchand, who they did not even have until the trade deadline. So this is a team that was already very good, and you could argue they are staying just as good, if not making them better, because they're retaining the players they already had, but they're still going to be right there. I mean, the argument's whether or not they stayed as good as they were when they won the Cup or got better. I mean, I guess you could make the argument they stayed as good just because they kept the players they already had, but staying as good means that they're a Stanley Cup favorite yet again, which does not make the Red Wings' life any easier.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. I mean, this team is loaded.
Right.
Yeah, it's an absolutely loaded team that got better. They dealt with some injury stuff last year, which obviously to start off the season will kind of be behind them. But yeah, man, I don't even really have too much else to say about the Panthers. That's, as we all know, legitimately one of the best rosters in the league, and they play their style. And now, I mean, heck, they have Jeff Petrie now. I mean.
Well, and there's the thing, too, is like they are, I guess, if you really want to be that guy, you could say they got marginally worse because they replaced Nate Schmidt with Jeff Petrie, but I don't think that moves
but that's
the needle.
one position. The rest of their
right.
moves, yeah.
I'm just saying if you want to be that guy and you want to be nitpicky, and it's just, this team is a wagon, and they're going to remain a wagon next season, too. So, yep.
Their win was bringing everyone back.
I hate this division. I hate this division.
That's really like, and again, like they did add some pieces, between the margins, but the biggest thing for them is how they magically were able to keep all three of their key players that hit free agency at the same time.
And it wasn't magically. The cap went up, and all of a sudden they had the space to do it. I mean, there were some shenanigans with Brad Marchand's contract, which
right.
I would look into. That's
magically
insane.
More in terms of Brad Marchand getting a 6-year deal than
age 37. But yeah, we'll take a quick break, but not looking good so far. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings, where we talk about the final 3 teams in the division we have not spoken about yet. Finishing second in the Atlantic Division this last season, Scotty, was the Tampa Bay Lightning. A resurgent season for the Lightning, who looked like they were kind of starting to trend downwards. They let Stamkos walk. They trade for Ryan McDonough back. They get and acquire Gensel and, of course, Braden Point pops off yet again. They had a very good regular season. Disappointing postseason, but they had a very good regular season. This offseason, Scotty, what were their big moves? Actually, off the top of my head, I'm not even entirely sure. Let's see here. They extended Yanni Gourde. They signed Pontus Holmberg and got Jacob Pelletier. Not much that they really had to do. They did not replace Nick Perbix on their bottom pairing. He went to Nashville. But I think the players that they kept, I think Pontus Holmberg could be kind of like a low-key home run signing for them. But another team that more than anything kind of stayed in the same lane they were already in, but the problem is that lane was second in the division.
Right, yeah. I think this is a team that you could argue, like, quote-unquote, got worse, but that doesn't really mean anything from the Wings' perspective. Like, they got worse maybe just because of another year or whatever, but, like, that's still far better than what presumably what the Red Wings are going to be. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that for a while we were kind of playing the when are they going to fall off game as well. Like every year it was like, are they going to finally fall back out of contention completely? And that never happened. And like you just mentioned, if anything, they kind of bounced back up in towards the top this year. So a team that is obviously wildly competitive every single year and has been for the better part of, going on a decade now. And this year is probably no different. No big additions, no substantial improvements, but when you're at second place, you don't really need to do so.
Right, and that's the thing, too, is I feel a little bit bad for the listeners. They come in and like talk about who got worse and who got better, but it's almost – most of these teams, the better and worse factor is so marginal that you can't really put them in either category, with the exception so far of Montreal and Ottawa, who we think got better. Florida largely stayed the same, but
has anyone gotten worse? Like this team definitely got worse this summer. Like we haven't said that about anybody.
I mean, Boston is the only one I can think about, but they're trying their own thing. And if it could work out for them, I don't think it will, but it could work out for them. But that goes back to what our conversation has been about this free agency as a whole, is there's a lot of teams that just re-upped and kept their guys. Florida Panthers, who are the offseason's biggest winners, they're the biggest winners because they kept their own guys. And that was the trend across the NHL, is guys kept their own guys, and the guys they did lose, they were able to replace at a similar cost/effectiveness because the players they lost were mostly bottom six forwards or bottom pair defensemen. Those are the guys who mostly hit the market. Ask the Red Wings. They lost Tyler Mott and got Mason Appleton in return. That's a marginal upgrade, who we'll talk about soon, but it doesn't make them, it's not so much better that you can really come on here and definitively say this team is better, Anyways, again, digressing. Toronto Maple Leafs next, Scotty. How do you feel the Toronto Maple Leafs offseason went after the loss of Mitch Marner?
Is this finally a team that just got worse? Like they just got less talented? I
think they've done fine with
guys they've brought in. Yeah,
but the loss
in the
of Marner. It's just the loss of Marner is such a gaping hole on their offense that they got worse. Again, I don't think they got so much worse that they're not going to be a top three team in the division, because they still have Nylander, they still have Matthews, they still have Riley, they still have Tavares. But losing Marner is a huge blow. They also lost Pontus Holmberg, who we already covered. But they did bring in Nick Roy in the trade for Marner, who is a nice fit. They brought in Matthias Macchielli. They brought in Michael Pezzetta. They got players who make their roster overall better, but it does not, like you said, recreate Marner in the aggregate.
Right.
So they are a team that got worse, but still had a pretty decent offseason regardless.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I think. What you want to talk Wings now?
Yeah, what's left? You got one team maybe that got worse. Everyone else, you could make the argument at least stayed the same. You could say the Buffalo Sabres got worse because they lost Peterka, but you could also make the argument that overall they may be better off for because they got Kesselring and Doan, and that makes their team a little bit more well-rounded. So
I agree with that, and I also think from, as we just mentioned, from the Leafs' perspective, they got worse. They lost one of the most talented players in the NHL, but there's still so much talent on that team, and they were able to still bring in, depth pieces. Has been a big criticism of the Leafs over the years. I think it honestly was much improved this past season anyway, but like they got better between the margins too, even if they lost their big piece. So yeah, man, like Wings, better or worse, or stayed the same for the Detroit Red Wings?
Marginally better.
Yeah,
Marginally.
that's
Like
kinda what
you
I am
might you
feeling.
might be max 5 points better, but I don't know if 5 points better is going to get you into the playoffs when 5 teams from the Atlantic Division made the playoffs, and so you
Right.
have to pass one of those teams. And each of those teams we just talked about, if they got worse, like Toronto, they didn't get 30 points worse. If they got better, it's Montreal and Ottawa, and so it's where. Again, it brings us back to the conversation. Yes, I believe the Red Wings are marginally better, marginally improved. But marginally improved, and this is to your credit, Scotty, being better than yourself last year is not the goal. Being better than the other teams around you is the goal. And they still have yet to add that piece that I'm looking for them to actually maybe be in that conversation for being better than Montreal or Ottawa has been. I mean, you could argue that maybe Montreal comes back down to earth. They had a phenomenal season. Maybe they're just not as good, but they also added Dobson and Bolduc. So it is as much as I want to sit here today and be like, in year 7 of Steve Yzerman's tenure as general manager, they should be making the playoffs. I see it's getting more difficult every year with this division to project this team in the playoffs because they just are not taking as a team the necessary steps forward. They have individual young players on this team taking the necessary steps forward, but until guys like, Danielson are on this roster, until guys like MBN and ASP are on this roster, it's hard for this core, this roster, for me to sit here and be like, yeah, they're taking a step forward. Not saying they can't. There's still a bright future here for this Detroit Red Wings team, but this offseason right now, projecting what this roster is supposed to be next year, I struggle again to see them making the playoffs. I think they'll be in the mix, but over the teams that made it this year, it's hard. It's a hard sell.
Right. I agree with you. I think that's the point, right? That's why we're doing this now, is where the team is at on July 9th is a hard sell. It's a really tough sell to the fan base that this current roster that you look at on July 9th is going to be a playoff team. That is why we're doing this on July 9th, because we're trying to reiterate the point again that another
Right.
move or two needs to happen, right? Like that is what we're waiting on. And when we do our preseason, predictions we do every year, hopefully we're talking about a different roster when we do those than we are on July 9th.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we are wrong in the best ways possible when we do those season predictions, when we come back to them later. But yeah, I mean, that's just Mason Appleton, I think, is a fine addition. I think JVR is a fine addition. Both those guys are going to play effective middle six or bottom 6 minutes. JVR might be your top line left wing. That is also a possibility that you brought up yesterday, and it could be a reality. He does not bring pace, but hey, he gets to the high danger areas. I digress. But it's just those two players do make your roster better over the Christian Fishers, over the Tarasengos, over the Mots that you had on this roster last year. I think JBD has a high upside. I'm not sure that he is going to pan out, but you didn't pay a lot to, get him on the roster. So you're better in your depth, which needed to improve, but the biggest holes are still the biggest holes. And I don't. John Gibson, obviously, that's an upgrade for them in net. Don't want to undersell that. Like, they are better in net, but there's still question marks there with his injury history and which version of John Gibson are you getting, right? So, yeah.
Word. Yeah, man. There's a lot of question marks, and I think even if you get, best case scenario for a lot of players, you're still short because there's still a move that, again, we are kind of looking for to be had this summer. So.
And like, this isn't meant to come off as like Yzerman slander either. And don't get me wrong, don't get us wrong. Like, we are critical of Steve Yzerman and the moves he's made, but it's hard to be critical of him in this free agent class when, again, I will say it again, everybody stayed with their team, or if they left, they already had a destination in mind. The Red Wings did not have a seat at the table on any of the big-time free agents because most of them did not go to free agency. So it's hard to be critical of the signings that he made. He did not overpay for anybody, which is, I think, worthy of praise, because it's easy to get desperate and overpay for
Right.
Your Tanner Jeannots of the world. This offseason, he stayed away from that. He made nice, cheap acquisitions on short-term deals to make this team better in the short term. marginally again, but it's just I'm still waiting for that big time trade. I don't know what big time trade is out there. I feel like he's missed out on a lot of them, but I feel like I need something to move the needle this offseason, or else I'm just going to get antsy.
Same.
All right, I've monologued enough here. The segment 3. How you feeling, buddy? You got anything left?
I don't think so, man. We balled though.
We do ball. We will be back with a new episode tomorrow. We're still somehow coming up with new content for you guys every day. I don't know how we're doing it, honestly, here July 8th. But final week of 5 days a week. Just to remind you, next week we will begin 3 days a week as per the network mandate, and we'll be 3 days a week through the end of August. But that is next week's problem. This week we still got another 2 episodes after this one for you guys. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. See your team every day.